My name is Tom Rehm. Today is January 15, 2023. Yesterday, I made a presentation to the Engineering, Science, and Technology Council of Houston. A recording was made of my presentation, but the image of my presentation as it was projected onto the wall of the room was so poor that recording is unusable. Therefore, I am re-recording my presentation from my home. My presentation was primarily a preview of an April 22nd Climate Solutions Symposium, which I will chair. The affiliations shown on this slide are my climate solution priorities, ranked by importance. I consider global solutions and outreach programs as my most important affiliation. The closing symposium speaker is Dr. Dick Hutchinson, a co-founder of that initiative. This is the symposium program. April 22nd is a Saturday. The symposium will be hybrid, with the in-person portion at the University of Houston Student Center Theater on University Drive, and the virtual portion via live streaming. We are using the talents of the University of Houston Web Technology Streaming Media Department to ensure that the virtual portion is high quality. This symposium will present the status of 3 initiatives. They are each vitally important. 2 are important to us in Texas and Louisiana and have the potential to be important models to follow outside our region. Global Solutions and Outreach Programs has an international focus. I will give you an overview of each of these 3 initiatives and request your support to promote sponsorship registrations and attendee registrations. In November 2019, the president-elect of the American Institute of Chemical Engineers invited me and Mark Holtzapfel to join him for breakfast at the AICHE annual meeting, which was held in Orlando. Mark is a professor of chemical engineering at Texas A&M and is the 2023 chair of the AICHE Climate Solutions Community. I am the 2023 past chair. In early 2019, AICHE launched the Climate Solutions Community. At that breakfast in November 2019, which was just the 3 of us, Monty told us about his vision, which became the Sustainable Energy Corps. He intentionally used the word Corps in the name, following John F. Kennedy's naming of the Peace Corps. Monty envisions having 1 million students engaged worldwide in the Sustainable Energy Corps. This is on the SEC homepage. Far too much detail to cover today. Monty will certainly go into this on April 22. Put simply, there are 2 major problems which the Sustainable Energy Corps hopes to fix. Engineers now graduating from universities need better skills to contribute to climate solutions work in industry when they graduate. The other problem is that industrial emissions must be reduced dramatically. Monty is trained in 6 Sigma and tells me that the 6 Sigma objective function must be the level of emissions in the atmosphere. Monty is very unhappy with the lack of progress thus far in climate solution efforts to reduce emissions. To put it mildly, we must do better. Monty would put it much more emphatically. Monty and I have discussed a pilot program in Texas and Louisiana to engage Gulf Coast industry with academia. A proposal has been submitted to the National Science Foundation for funding that pilot program. The next initiative focuses on the reliability of the ERCOT electric grid in Texas. Most of us went through Storm Uri in February 2021. Each of these gentlemen have a lot to say about what can be done to improve the reliability of the grid. Joel will describe what Enchanted Rock is doing to improve the reliability through gas microgrids. Gene and Caleb will focus on transitioning the grid to carbon neutral energy. A few months ago, I attended a session of the University of Houston Energy Symposium series. The session was entitled The Future of Nuclear and the Energy Transition. Mark Woodby, Director of Engineering for the Nuclear Sector at the Electric Power Research Institute, was on the panel. I spoke with Mark after the session. Mark is flying Caleb Tomlin to Houston at EPRI's expense, as he sees this symposium's importance in this region. Industry incurred considerable losses from emergency shutdowns during Storm Uri. Plants are designed to have controlled shutdowns. They cannot simply flip a switch. The slammed shut emergency shutdowns of February 2021 caused a lot of problems to industry in Texas, not only business interruption losses, but equipment problems, which made complicated and delayed restart. Caleb's message will be important to industry. Nuclear small modular reactors as industrial park microgrids can provide industry with independence from the ERCOT grid. They will be commercially viable in just a few years. Industry should begin long-range planning now. In March 2021, I pulled a few colleagues together to talk about what could be done to prevent another grid failure. A colleague, Gene Preston, PhD electrical engineer in Austin, was in that early group. Last September, I invited others to join us, and we met to achieve two objectives: to find speakers for the 2023 symposium and to begin an initiative to improve the reliability of the ERCOT grid. I am optimistic that the symposium will give this initiative a big boost. Our closing speaker will be Dr. Dick Hutchinson. Dick is a retired chemical engineer. He is a bit older than I am. He turned 79 in April. Dick and I are co-founders of Global Solutions and Outreach Programs. Dick spent his career working in U.S. Army projects, primarily dealing with chemicals. As most of you will remember, in the 1980s, Iraq used chemicals in their war with Iran and also against the Kurds inside Iraq. As a result of Iraq's use of chemicals, a Geneva Convention was called to figure out what should be done. It started in 1990 and concluded in 1993. In connection with that Geneva Convention, the U.S. undertook a 3-year U.S. Army project involving almost 300 professionals to figure out what the U.S. needed to do to protect itself against chemical and biological terrorism. Dick led that effort. He and his colleagues used the wicked problem approach to do that work. About 10 years ago, he co-founded the Stable Climate Group, which formed around using the wicked problem approach to resolve global warming, and then he wrote a book about it. I will close today with symposium details and a request for your help in promoting the symposium. I now want to focus on the most important of these 3 climate solution initiatives, Global Solutions and Outreach Programs. This is a screenshot from our website. Notable here is the Einstein quote: "The significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them." I will talk about Adam Smith's invisible hand, which has done wonders for civilization over the past 250 years, but now business as usual is preventing resolution of today's existential problem of global warming. This is a list of climate solution initiatives in which I am involved. Last November at the AICHE annual meeting in Phoenix, I made 2 presentations. I went through each of these initiatives, emphasizing that each of these well-intended initiatives is detrimentally affected by understandable human biases. I made one presentation to about 80 in a student conference session and the other to about 30 in an AICHE management division session. My message was well received, particularly at the student session. In both presentations, I concluded that the only way to mitigate the detrimental effects of human biases is to implement global solutions and outreach programs. These human biases are deeply embedded in business as usual. But first, I want to take a few minutes to confront a fiction. The fiction is that there is no global warming problem. I am developing a concept that I call the 7 levels of climate grief. I intend to mold this into a series of articles. Denial is the first level of climate grief. Thankfully, the number of deniers is shrinking. At level 2, there is agreement that our planet is warming, but the view is, hey, it's not a big deal. The argument is that it's happened before and it's just a natural cycle. At level 3, there is genuine concern, but it's not our fault. The causes are mostly natural, with maybe a little human influence. The folks at level 4 despair because they think the problem is too complex to fix, and they see themselves as having no power to affect any change. At level 5, many cling to solutions that promise great things, even if their failure could destroy economies. These people are desperate. Those at level 6 have confidence that the marketplace will work its wonders. Adam Smith's invisible hand will save the day. Business as usual, supported by government policy, will work its wonders. Never mind the 2-year revolving political door and the whims of political parties on those policies. That takes us to level 7, the wicked problem approach, which is the methodology of global solutions and outreach programs. Our only remedy to mitigate human bias in the complicated task of figuring out how to best resolve global warming. At the retreat of the Engineering, Science, and Technology Council of Houston yesterday, I had a handout with plots of temperature data for 13 states, and those of you viewing this online should have that with you also somehow by a link. Okay, so there were plots of temperature data for 13 states. One is Texas. The others are grouped at grief level 1 and grief level 2. I used the results of a 2021 Yale University study to group these states. Those states at the denial level and at the it's not serious level are getting warmer at a rate never seen before on our planet by living creatures. The medieval warming period is touted as evidence that today's warming has happened before, so there's nothing to worry about, just a natural cycle. Well, the most rapid period of temperature rise during this period was 0.9 degrees Fahrenheit over a 50-year period. This occurred only in the North Atlantic. 500 million years ago, we were almost 8 degrees Celsius warmer than we are today. So people say, well, what's the big deal? A little bit of warming and it won't hurt anybody. The dinosaurs are happy. Well, the big deal is the rate of change. The most rapid change that the dinosaurs had to endure was about 1 degree Celsius every million years. Even we humans could survive that rate of change. Unfortunately, we're warming at more than 1 degree Celsius every 100 years. This is a portion of the first figure in the executive summary of the 4th National Climate Assessment. Since the mid-1960s, the planet has warmed about 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Those in climate grief levels 1 and 2 would mock this as hysterical, and most don't believe the numbers on this plot. Let's look at the states in climate grief levels 1 and 2. Half of those states have temperature trends of 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit or worse. Here's a short story for you. About 5 years ago, a chemical engineer got worried about me becoming overly concerned about global warming, so he told me, Tom, it's always been hot in Texas. I first came to Texas in 1993, and I recalled, when he said that, I recalled that it was hot back then. Well, I thought I'd look into it. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, NOAA, has temperature data from all U.S. meteorological stations. I went to the NOAA site, which is public. Anybody can get to the data, and pulled up some data from Texas meteorological stations, about a dozen or so stations. I plotted up that data. About a year ago, I presented those data plots at the annual retreat of the ECH. All showed a rapid rate of temperature rise in Texas. Well, that got me curious, and I looked at I found out that there were over 2,000 meteorological stations in Texas, not the dozen or so I had found. And I plotted up several hundred sets of data, and I went on to these other states. My wife, Mary, sometimes catches me at my computer. Well, quite often probably, and she says, "Oh no, more blue dots." Let's move on to solutions. This is a plot from the 2 Degree Institute website showing CO2 measurements taken at the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii. The measurement is taken every day and added to this plot. It doesn't look like we're making any progress on solving our planetary problem. A major factor is that global energy demand continues to rise. These figures are from Our World in Data. Between 2010 and 2021, global energy demand rose 33%. Electricity generation from solar and wind increased much more, by 760%. That is an admirable accomplishment. Solar and wind are touted as the climate solutions that will save us. I'm not so sure. I first met Dick Hutchinson just after his book, People's Assessment of Global Warming, came out in 2019. When I was midway through my year as chair of the AICHE South Texas section in 2019, Phil Westmoreland, the 2013 president of AICHE, heard about Dick's work and suggested that I find out what he was up to. Dick and I talked about his idea for about a year and a half. Then in early 2021, I hosted several webinars where he explained the wicked problem approach and his proposal to use it to resolve global warming, which Dick and I later named Global Solutions and Outreach Programs. The wicked problem approach is a method to mitigate the understandable human biases of public passions, vested interests, both career and corporate, and political agendas. We beta tested our website in the fall of 2021 and began working to put our proposal to the public. 1 year ago, we had about 30 working with us on 4 impact sector teams. Most were engineers and scientists. By August last year, our numbers had grown to about 60, and we had held 2 briefings with professionals from the insurance and finance industries. We also decided to focus on 4 additional impact sectors. I'll continue talking about GSOP after this brief interlude to discuss how well we humans are now doing on solving global warming. There have been many studies. I will talk about 2 that are well known, and then about a Harvard review of 40 studies. Project Drawdown is cited by many as a great success. I read their book when it came out in 2017. It went into details on about 100 solutions. It was a library of solutions. Tour the aisles in the store, pick a solution, mix and match. Not much dissimilar than how the annual COP meetings, Conference of Party meetings, are sometimes described, which is a potluck dinner where nations bring their favorite dishes. Everyone samples this dish and that dish, and then all go home with new ideas. That might be a bit harsh, or perhaps it's not far from reality. There are very complex intersecting issues between major subsystems, which cannot be solved as easily as filling a shopping cart. Subsystems such as electricity generation, transmission and distribution, transportation, and manufacturing. I was disappointed with their assessment of nuclear power when I read their book. I remain disappointed because they do not even consider advanced nuclear technology. They are pro-renewables. I have no problem with renewables as long as we understand their limitations. Look at the comparison between nuclear and solar PV. Advanced reactors are out of the scope of their analysis. However, solar PV is assumed to grow from 180 terawatt hours up to almost 10,000 terawatt hours by 2050. Is this wishful thinking? They favor wind turbines, onshore and offshore, giving a conservative estimate of onshore growth from 4.4% of world generation to 20-something% by 2050. Is this wishful thinking? The Deep Decarbonization Pathways Project was begun in conjunction with COP21 in Paris, the 21st annual conference of parties organized by the IPCC. The two organizations who led this project are IDDRI in France and the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network. I have highlighted here those in their leadership at that time who had engineering and scientific degrees. I'm a chemical engineer. If we are to build and operate anything with commercial viability, it will depend on good engineering. There was one engineer among their 2015 leadership. The current director of Deep Decarbonization Pathways projects is Henry Weisman. He has a master's in physics and a doctorate in economics. Several members of the original project leadership had degrees in economics. DDPP was a major step forward as they studied 4 deep decarbonization cases with different levels of renewable energy, nuclear, and fossil fuels with carbon capture and sequestration. This was a significant effort and a major step toward figuring out how to resolve global warming. 2 legal minds took the 2015 report and produced guidance as editors of a study on legal mechanisms to support the DDPP recommendations. One of the 2 editors, John Dernbach, then developed a dozen type of legal tools based on the earlier 2018 publication. This is all good work. I'm not saying it isn't. However, I see many more economists and lawyers involved than I see engineers and scientists involved. I think this is a major problem. In late 2018, Jesse Jenkins, who has a doctorate in engineering systems, and 2 colleagues reviewed 40 decarbonization studies with a focus on the electric power sector. Within their conclusion section is an important statement. They concluded that setting aside the development of firm, low-carbon technologies because those technologies face challenges today would amount to betting the planet on the assumption that all of the conditions needed for an affordable wind and solar-centered path to decarbonize electricity will all fall into place. What was Jenkins referring to when he said firm, low-carbon technologies? He was referring to nuclear. About a year ago, I connected with Simon Michaud. If you think that solar and wind will save us, listen to this podcast. Simon is an expert in mineralogy. His doctorate is in mining engineering. He knows a hell of a lot about mineral reserves. He lays the dilemma on the table, which is that our planet cannot provide the minerals needed for renewables to save us. By the way, I encourage you to listen to this podcast, even though he draws that same conclusion for nuclear. However, Simon is off the mark regarding advanced nuclear. I am pro-nuclear. I do not think we can get out of our mess without a significant increase in nuclear in the electricity generation mix. This article appeared just 2 weeks ago by the editors of Bloomberg. Net zero is not possible without nuclear. A few months ago, I was asked to submit a paper to this journal on nuclear energy. The paper is available now. One peer reviewer thought that my title was too strident. I said, "This is my opinion, and the journal is about opinion." These are the section titles in my paper. A premise, in my opinion, is that so-called renewables are not renewable because our planet does not have the mineral reserves to go 200 years out. I was born in 1950. Some of my grandchildren's grandchildren will be around in the first half of the next century. In my view, we have to plan at least 200 years into the future. Legacy nuclear, which is water moderated, cannot do it because we only have about 90 years of proven uranium reserves. Also, there is public sentiment against legacy nuclear since long-lived so-called nuclear waste is generated, which is due to the fact that only 3% of the fuel in most light water reactors is the fissile element U-235. There is also the unfounded concern over the dangers of nuclear plants. That's another presentation for another time, but I can provide a lot of reading material if you're interested. For these reasons, nuclear is discounted offhand. Only advanced nuclear will resolve global warming. In a paragraph in my conclusions, I note several opportunities for chemical engineers. Einstein said, "If you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough." He also said that the welfare of humanity must be a primary concern of engineers and scientists. The problem to solve is simple. Global warming threatens humanity. The solution is not simple. It is very complex. That is why engineers and scientists must step up to the plate. We cannot rely on wishful thinking and national promises that are heavily influenced by human biases. We cannot continue with business as usual. Since October last year, Dick Hutchinson and I and 4 other members of our GSOP management team have been holding regular GSOP briefings to explain our proposal to use the wicked problem approach to arrive at national, regional, and global action plans to resolve global warming. Our development committee has more than doubled over the past year. With the success of our recent briefings, the committee will begin reaching out to sectors of our society, industry, and the marketplace who have or will be impacted by global warming. You can join us at our next meeting on January 24. Let me know if you're interested. Dr. Hutchinson describes 3 projects in his book. The first project focuses on mitigating greenhouse gas release and adaptation. The second focuses on figuring out how to stabilize the Earth's energy balance, essentially drawdown of greenhouse gases, and addresses other major problems such as ocean acidification. The third project focuses on improving climate monitoring and modeling and the development of promising climate solution technologies. This slide and the next 2 are described in detail in our briefings. The process consists of simultaneous, in-depth analysis of each option, evaluated by an integration team which includes experts in macroeconomics, social sciences, and policy. Iterations continue until a satisfactory national action plan is in hand. This slide illustrates how the 3 projects will be integrated at a national level, and it shows the purpose of the outreach program in the United States to engage states, local communities, and industry. Each nation that engages in this work will follow the same method of simultaneous in-depth analysis of each option, engagement with local communities and provinces and industry, and iteration to arrive at its national plan to resolve global warming. At the international level, there will be global evaluation and integration teams that will focus on ensuring that the national action plans will combine to produce a global action plan that will result in resolving our planetary problem. Iteration on a global scale will continue until a satisfactory global action plan is produced. The many studies done thus far, including Project Drawdown and Deep Decarbonization Pathways Project, have not come close to achieving what must be done. The work we propose must be done, or we are betting the farm on Adam Smith's invisible hand to work magic. Every nation must fund their own GSOP work. This is the budget for the United States. 3 years of work, 380 full-time personnel, about 3,000 part-time personnel. Basing salaries on the average U.S. chemical engineer's salary, the 3-year budget is $350 million. The common reaction is, are you guys nuts? Early last year, the global management consulting firm McKinsey & Company estimated that it will cost $275 trillion to reduce net carbon emissions to zero by 2050. At a rate of $275 trillion over 30 years, $350 million is spent every 8 hours. Well, you say, Tom, you want many nations to be involved and that they must also provide their own funding. So it's going to be more than $350 million. Well, that's correct. Prorating to all OECD countries, the global GSOP budget over 3 years would be about $6 billion. At a rate of $275 trillion over 30 years, a global GSOP budget of $6 billion is equivalent to about 6 days of spending. Let me ask you this. Are you confident that we will wisely spend $275 trillion over the next 30 years under the influence of corporate vested interest, career vested interest, public passions, and political agendas without an attempt to mitigate those biases? And after we spend those $275 trillion and have not resolved the problem by 2050, then what are we going to do? Once again, here is the symposium program. April 22, 1 to 4 p.m., University of Houston Student Center Theater. The status of 3 important initiatives will be presented. The Sustainable Energy Corps has a focus of bringing academia and industry together to collaborate on improving the climate solution skill sets of graduating engineers and to reduce industrial greenhouse gas emissions. There is an effort underway now to get funding to pilot the initiative in Texas and Louisiana with a focus on Gulf Coast industry. Let's Make Texas More Reliable and Cleaner has a focus on improving the reliability of the Texas ERCOT electric grid and transitioning it to carbon neutral generation of electricity. And Global Solutions and Outreach Programs has a focus on replacing too much wishful thinking that is detrimentally affected by understandable human biases with engineering analysis with involvement on integration teams from experts in macroeconomics, social sciences, and policy. By using the wicked problem approach in a truly international effort, the current IPCC work must be augmented with these analyses. Following the presentations, there will be a panel Q&A, after which in-person attendees will be invited to a ballroom adjoining the upper level of the theater for a meet and greet. These are the initiatives. I'm just rolling through them one more time. This is the Sustainable Energy Corps. Let's Make Texas Cleaner and More Reliable. And the Global Solutions and Outreach programs, and then our meet and greet following that. This coming week, registration for attendance, both in person and live streaming, and sponsorship registration will be live online. All symposium registrations are being managed by the Texas Association of Environmental Professionals. Some of the program handouts today have a copy of sponsorship benefits. We ask all ECH societies to actively support our sponsorship drive. Those societies who help bring in sponsorships will share in symposium profits. There is no risk in providing the support. In the unlikely event that the symposium incurs loss, profits from our 2020 symposium, which have been sitting in an ECH bank account, will be used to cover the loss. In 2020, 280 registered with 200 paying $10 registration fees, plus we raised about $1,000 from sponsorships. So we do not expect to have loss. We hope that we raise money so that all of the Houston area ECH constituent societies will have funds to actively be involved in climate solution initiatives going forward. This is an opportunity for the local societies to raise funds. I just want to point out one more thing before I close. Our symposium is timely. This week, a 3-day conference was held in Houston. A reporter with Houston's Business Lawyers publication almost used our exact symposium byline, which is that Texas should lead the energy transition. This is a snippet from the conference registration page. An organization called 10 Across, I suppose I-10 cutting across from west to east, organized the conference. We will reach out to them. We will also reach out to the city of Houston. Now I will conclude my presentation and ask for your help to make our symposium a success. Texas can and should lead in the transition to carbon neutral energy. This symposium can and should be a major event in kicking off that transition. Each initiative presented at the symposium is very important. We have 2 requests. Help us promote sponsorships and help us promote in-person and live streaming registrations. Texas should lead a responsible energy transition that will ensure healthy national economies. Our symposium is an important event in accomplishing that objective. Thank you very much for listening.